Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Well, former President Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty to 37 charges related to alleged mishandling of classified documents. Trump's lawyers asked for a jury trial during the former president's arraignment yesterday at a federal courthouse in Miami. Wow, scene outside the courtroom. Wow, scene outside Mar-a-Lago. Then he flew to New Jersey. We're going to talk about that this morning with the one and only Rashonda Tate Billingsley of the Defender Network and Robert Tarver of the Tarver Law Firm in New Jersey. Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
It's good to see you both as always. We're going to start with the attorney. Usually it's ladies first, but we're going to give way to our esteemed attorney. Break it down for us, Mr. Tarver, Attorney Tarver. 37 counts. Um, Yesterday's proceedings, why he wasn't, um, he was electronically fingerprinted, no mugshot, released on his own recognizance, along with his alleged co-conspirator. Um,
This is
Set the
this,
scene for us,
this
please.
is all very standard stuff. He was not treated any differently than any other defendant in federal court. There are certain crimes under which the federal system says we will allow you to be released on a bond. It's a personal bond, so you're not putting up any money for the most part. And you can go about your business as long as you abide by the conditions of release. So what he did is he went in, he entered his plea of not guilty. We always talk about, oh, he's entered a plea of not guilty. Well, everyone enters a plea of not guilty or there's no case. So he entered a plea of not guilty. He was advised to meet with pretrial services. Pretrial services in the federal system sets the conditions of release. The conditions of release are standard: that you not become involved in any other criminal activity, that you report when you're supposed to report to court. And if you don't do those things that you're required to do under the pretrial release agreement, then you can be brought back into court and you could be thrown into jail. I happen to know that even in Florida, because I tried a case in Florida about a year and a half ago and had a defendant who just violated a minor condition of the federal pretrial release and was brought back and was put in jail for that time period. So everything was really standard yesterday. No one anticipated anything happening inside of the courtroom that would be different. Outside of the courtroom, of course, standard Trump, hoopla, nonsense, and everything else like that. But inside the court, nothing different. He was read, he had the opportunity to receive the indictment, 37 counts, describing his criminal behavior. And of course, as he moves forward through this system, this is going to be a jury trial matter, meaning that he will have 12 jurors decide his fate at some particular point. But before that, there are going to be a series of motions that occur. Now, those motions are going to be in front of this judge that he had the problem with, Eileen Cannon. Not that he had the problem with, but that the DOJ had a problem with, Eileen Cannon. And it's going to be very interesting going forward to see how she handles things.
It's interesting too, Rashonda. So the magistrate handled it yesterday, but he said that Trump cannot communicate with his alleged co-conspirator, his buddy, Mr. Norta. But the judge also told prosecutors to make a list of potential witnesses that Trump can't communicate with about the case except through counsel. Um, as a journalist, how interesting do you find those terms?
The judge might as well have just said, admit you love Joe Biden. He's not going to follow those. And I understand he's telling him you can talk to him about everything but this case.
Yeah.
Trump isn't going to follow it. I was, intrigued, and I don't know why that we continue to follow it the way that we did, like the OJ trial,
Mhm.
the reason he's in office today, because journalists cover him around the clock nonstop. I was happy to see some places didn't cover his speech per se, but then they turned around and recapped everything that he said in it.
Yeah, it is interesting. And someone called me yesterday saying, why do you guys even bother? And the thing about it is, as journalists, we cover. We have to cover these things. This is unprecedented. This is something that you just can't ignore. You can look away, but you can't ignore. This is an ex-president. This is someone who is alleged to have committed crimes. Really, not only since he's been out of office, but while in office.
Mhm.
Yeah, look, we've
Um,
never seen anything like this, Stacey. We've never seen anyone who is so brazenly open about rejecting the laws of the United States.
yeah,
We've never seen a group of people who are supposed lawmakers who support that type of activity. We've never seen the courts be used in such a perverse way to be able to avoid justice. We've never seen a person have to appear before so many courts and have to deal with so many legal situations in such a high position. So you've got this confluence of events that makes this thing newsworthy. I mean, we can't ignore it. I don't know how you turn away. You can ignore some of the hyperbole and the lies that Trump continues to tell. And I think that Rashonda's completely right when she says that type of thing should not be covered. But as
yeah.
far as what goes on in the arraignment and those things like that, we got to cover it. And let's face it, some of the news organizations make a lot of money covering these events. So there's a lot of motivations, I think, in a lot of different areas.
Well, I always say this, and I'll say it again. I cover politics. I don't get involved in them. They are just that. This is what it's all about. This stuff that we're seeing now. But Rashonda, I want to say this too, though. I want to highlight this though, because for those, and I saw D.L. Hughley do a dissertation on this, when folks are saying it's a sad day or a dark day. But here's the thing. Let me read this because I think it's important. I want you to weigh in. Of course, Attorney Tarver can probably just break it down even further. But 2 weeks ago, and I'm reading this thing here, a federal judge sentenced Robert Bertram, a former Air Force lieutenant colonel, to 3 years in jail for removing hundreds of classified documents from an authorized location and storing them in his home and his office. In April, a judge sentenced Jeremy Brown, a former member of the U.S. Special Forces, to more than 7 years in prison, partly for taking classified documents home with him. The report that he took home contains sensitive intelligence, including about an informant in another country. And then 2 years ago, another man whose name I cannot pronounce, he's a Vietnamese American, received a 5.5-year sentence for storing National Security Agency documents at his home. Prosecutors in that case emphasized that this man, and I'll try and pronounce it, Nagaya Hong Fo, was aware he was not supposed to have the documents. Those three recent cases are among dozens in the DOJ, in which the DOJ has charged people with removing classified information from its proper place. The list also includes former high-ranking officials like David Petraeus, you remember him, and John Deutsch, who ran the CIA. They both ran the CIA. And of course, Donald Trump now has been arraigned in a Miami federal court on 37 charges. So this is a way of showing that even presidents are not above the law.
Not above the law, but they also, we're not dealing with a sane individual here, if you will, because what has happened is he has really taken this spectacle that was his presidency. We saw this for 4 years, and he cultivated from years as a tabloid fixture and a reality star. And this is no different. This whole trial is no different. He came and he made it into a show and he raised money off of it. And he has the support of millions of people, including those that make our laws, behind him. And so he feels like he has carte blanche to say whatever and do whatever because he knows he has a whole legion of supporters, especially on the congressional side. They're not addressing it. If you try and bring up all of those cases you just named, they'll turn around and say, but Hillary's emails.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have to differ with you on one thing. I think he's a very sane individual because I've dealt with him and his kind here in Atlantic City when he dealt with the casino. He knows exactly what he's doing. Donald Trump is a chameleon, and he can be what he needs to be, just as he was a Democrat and a an anti-abortion supporter. Now he had been something else before. He recognized and understood that fear and division was the best thing that he could stoke in order to be able to change this country and to create a cult-like atmosphere. It is no Donald Trump knows exactly what he's doing. The autographed copy of Mein Kampf that he kept and that he read and that he supposedly keeps by his bedside is just a roadmap to the type of behavior that we have seen. It emulates Hitler. It emulates Mussolini. It emulates all of the fascist dictators that we've seen over the years. And his fascination should have told us a long time ago exactly what he was going to do and exactly how he was going to do it. The only thing that was the strange denominator here is that he had lawmakers, legislators, to follow in lockstep with him, even when they called him out from the very beginning. Look at Lindsey Graham's statements. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump will destroy the Republican Party and will deserve it. Look at everyone else's statements as to what they believed at the time and now where they stand. So he knew what he was doing, and he's done it very well. He's been deviously smart.
You know, the judge. So we talk about how, in the grand scheme of things, everything that went on yesterday, he didn't really get special treatment. But it's interesting because then we just saw that shot there. The judge didn't place any travel restrictions on him, and he has a private plane. he allegedly has a great relationship with certain foreign countries, including North Korea and Russia. Attorney Tarver, if that were you or me or Rashonda, wouldn't there have been travel restrictions?
Well, there could be travel restrictions, not necessarily. I mean, quite frankly, the federal courts are relatively loose in terms of a lot of these restrictions. You have to call sometimes if you're going to travel, but they don't really restrict travel as strongly as you might think with the state courts, because the state courts only have limited jurisdiction, so they don't want you leaving their borders. Federal courts have national jurisdiction, and if necessary, international jurisdiction under extradition laws. So they're not as concerned about that. However, the fact of the matter is, where is Donald Trump going to go that someone is not going to recognize that he's there? He is probably the most recognized individual at this point on the face of the planet. So it probably was not a real issue.
No mugshot. They said that, and here was the reason for the no mugshot. They said he's easily recognizable. Look, there's been people with names as big and record. Michael Jackson comes to mind. He had a mugshot, and where could Michael Jackson go and hide?
Yeah. Well, again, that's state court procedure. So
that's true.
I've had federal defendants. They don't necessarily get mugshots in that fashion. There are things that are done through pretrial services. So things are very, very different between the state courts and the federal courts. It may appear that he's getting a lot of leniency here and being treated differently, but I have to tell you, not necessarily so.
Yeah. Well, he is still Rashonda, the front runner for the 2024 GOP nomination. He fundraised the minute the indictment, I should say, was announced. He took in more money, and certainly after his jersey and raised more money. This can you see a scenario, Rashonda, where this is really helping his run? Because really now it seems to come down to one or two things for him: prison or the White House.
And that's why he's fighting so hard to get in the White House. And yeah, it is helping him for the moment. it's rallying his supporters, it's getting those people behind him. And so a lot of people on the big scheme of things may think he's really benefiting from this. But I would beg to differ, because there has to come a point where independents whose vote he needs are getting tired of this. They're getting tired of the constant news that follows him, the constant negativity, and he feeds off it all. I don't think he needed a mugshot, because he would have had that on a T-shirt selling it. He will make a dime any way he can, and his supporters are none the wiser.
But look, the independents are not going to clue in until the general election. He has an end game here, and that end game is to make sure that he maintains the sizable portion of the Republican vote for the primary. And right now he's doing it. He's still at double digits ahead of DeSantis in Iowa. If he continues that trend, if he's able to do that, then he will be the nominee. And that's where the problem comes. And Rashawn's completely right, because those independents at that point are like, we've had enough of this show. So the really interesting thing you saw this week is you saw the Koch brothers throwing out ads. Now the very, very right-wing Koch brothers are basically saying, hey, maybe it's time to move away from Donald Trump. It depends. We'll look to see who follows, but at least they know that this thing is going to be a huge problem if he does get the nomination.
So 37 felony counts. Now, historically, at least the reputation is historically that prosecutors overcharge. Attorney Tarver, what do you see in these 37 counts that might be an overcharge?
I don't see an overcharge. And that's what I think is really interesting. Even Bill Barr himself said, look, this is a solid indictment. Jonathan Turley, who is always in the strongest right-wing camps, was talking wildly before he actually saw the indictment. And even he now is saying, hey, this is a huge problem. The one great thing about this for the DOJ is they decided that they were going to meticulously lay out the factual scenario that supports every one of those counts. And so for each one of those counts that you see there is a narrative in the indictment that goes along with it. Prosecutors don't always do that. Sometimes it's just bare bones. But here, every one of those counts is sustained. And again, people want to argue about did he know he was taking documents? Could he declassify? My position is that is not the strongest count here. The strongest count here is that he took war plans and showed them to outside individuals who are going to be witnesses here. We're talking about two journalists who saw these things, who had no right to see them. And during that conversation, he says, hey, I didn't classify it. It's too late for me to do that now. I can't do that. Everything is encapsulated in that one area of discussion that's in the indictment. It basically shows that he knew what he was doing. It basically shows that he knew he couldn't declassify. It shows that he was willing to share those with other individuals, which basically goes to your mindset. And it shows that he intended to benefit by having those, because the benefit is to be able to show, as he was trying to do, that, hey, I'm not the one who wanted to go to war with Iran. It was General Milley. So all of those things are encapsulated in that one incident. And people are getting really, tied up in this whole thing about, well, he thought he could declassify, he thought he could do this or whatever. And he is even trying to deflect. That's what he was doing in Bedminster last night. When he starts talking about, that I could declassify when I want to, no, you're not going to change this around. And journalists have to be strong enough and smart enough and astute enough to stick to the facts of that one four-cornered incident, because that is really the case.
Rashonda, so have you seen in your time as a journalist, or even in the history books, we think Richard Nixon comes to mind, obviously, because of his predicament. But did he behave this way? Have we seen someone behave the way that this former president has behaved, as far as, almost stating that he's not almost, but he has stated in the past that he's above the law, that he could, shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, et cetera, and get away with it. But so brazen, I guess. Have we seen this before?
No, this is this is that reality TV, social media. He has a platform that we have never seen before. Nixon years didn't have Twitter, didn't have
Mhm.
Truth Social, and so Trump is taking that, and he is a master at mastering those venues, and so he is using them. He is saying the things to get the people riled up, and that those are the things that worry me. I'm surprised we haven't seen more violence yet, but he knows how to skirt around to incite a January 6th without being able to claim, without being to still be able to claim innocence. He knows exactly what he's doing. So Attorney Tarver, I do agree with him on that. I always say he's crazy like a fox because he knows exactly what buttons to push, how to get the sympathy, and he's riding this train now all the way. He's fundraising before he walks into court.
So, Attorney Tarver, a good question is: so we know that this is a lot of firsts, right? Twice impeached, first, first to be twice impeached, first to be found civilly liable in a sexual harassment suit, the first to be indicted by the state, now the first former president to be federally indicted. How might this case affect the other cases that are pending?
Well, this case has already affected the E. Jean Carroll case because the judge just recently ruled that now E. Jean Carroll can seek additional damages
Yep.
for defamation. Now, that is huge. And the reason why that's huge is she can seek what are called punitive damages. Punitive damages are meant to punish an individual for acting egregiously. And what he's done is he's acted against court orders. He's acted against his interests. He's acted against the order which shows that he was found liable. He could literally be hit for hundreds of millions of dollars in that particular case. That case could take all of his money, and that's a personal lawsuit.
Mhm.
When you talk about whether or not this case affects others or other cases affect this, one thing you have to really think about is there are two other cases on the horizon. There is the January 6th investigation that's going on. And interestingly enough, Jack Smith was moving forward in Washington, D.C. With his team, bringing two individuals who were electors in Nevada in for testimony. So they're not wasting any time. They're moving forward with that. But also on the horizon is the Georgia phone call case with Fani Willis. And that, I think, is going to be looming large in the background. So you're going to have all of these things happening at the same time. And I've always talked about this on this show. We have a thing called relevant conduct in the federal system. So if you are convicted of something in the federal system, they can take what happened in those other cases, even if you're not adjudicated in those cases, even if they are allegations, and say this is all relevant conduct. And those go against you when a judge decides under the sentencing guidelines whether or not to give you more time or less time. So that's how this case is affected in that way. The real question is, how is it going to be affected if Fani Willis moves forward and has an indictment in Georgia at the same time this is going on? So that's going to be a really interesting question. There
Yeah, how do they parse that? Because that case in Georgia, right, is a very serious, that would be serious charges if she does indeed indict, which all indications are that there will be an indictment in Georgia. That's tampering with the election or election fraud or something of that nature. But then you have the case, as you alluded to, that Jack Smith has been working on in Washington, the January 6th case, which could inciting a riot. Yeah, that could even lead to treason charges. Charges, like that. You got the case in New York that's they are expected to start next spring, I believe, is the date, March of 2024. Is there a point where if these other indictments do, and they appear they are coming down, but if they come down, say this year, how do you? Does someone say, okay, I need to wait for you
Yeah,
first?
it presents a very serious problem, and here's where some of the prosecutors may be shooting themselves in the foot, because the fact of this whole thing is that a defendant has to be able to have time to prepare his or her case. And a judge is not going to rush into a situation where an individual does not have the ability, because of whatever factors, to be able to prepare their case. I would expect that if there is a Georgia indictment, that the first thing you're going to see is a motion in the United States District Court in Florida saying that we need time to be able to prepare for several different cases. So we're going to need to extend these deadlines. Now, where it gets really sticky is that when you have a federal court in one state and a state court in the same state, the state court will always defer to the federal court just because of the authority of that. But here we have a federal jurisdiction in Florida and a state jurisdiction in Georgia. So there are real questions as to who would defer to who. I would think the federal court would probably win out because under Article 6, Paragraph 2, which is the supremacy clause, the federal courts, the federal constitution, and the federal laws always take supremacy over state laws. So I think that we would see movement on that first, and that the Georgia matter, even if indicted, they would probably have to back down from moving off of certain things.
Wow, it's a whole lot, and then you have the election, which they're not going to postpone the election. That's for sure. So Rashonda, earlier you talked about how the media covers Trump. How do you cover this? I mean, so much to cover, so many indictments and the election. What's your plan as a journalist? What's your newspaper's plan, I should say?
I mean, unfortunately, we have to cover the news aspect of it. We created this monster by the nonstop coverage, the nonstop free coverage that America gave him, because he was the only one calling in to the stations, because he was the only one that was constantly talking. And this is what we got from that. We will cover when he loses the election, the primary. But, we really do. You have to cover the basics. I just think we have to be smart and not cover everything around the clock.
Mm-hmm. So Power 96 says I cover it very easily. I turn the channel. So with all of that said, though, Attorney Tarver, we asked you this before. If this was your client with all of these cases, in fact, before we even go back down that road, there was multiple reports that said that he searched high and low up until the last minute yesterday to find a lawyer to represent him in this particular case. Where are we at now when a former president can't get a lawyer?
Well, look, there's a recognition how Donald Trump has conducted business from up and down the East Coast, across the nation. He has not paid his bills. He has not respected agreements with people that he's hired. Moreover, and more importantly for attorneys, he's not taken attorneys' advice. And so if you get involved with Donald Trump as an attorney, number one, as we've seen, you risk being in legal jeopardy yourself. Mm-hmm. Number two, if you're going to be with him, you're along for the ride with him. He's actually directing the defense. And the problem with that is that's your reputation as an attorney that goes down the tube. And one thing that teach you from law school on, the only thing an attorney has in his profession is his reputation. And so you have attorneys who may be looking at this and saying, it's not worth it. It's not worth it because this is not a client who's going to do the right thing. This is a client who may put me in legal jeopardy. And why would I do that, particularly when I don't even know if I'm going to get paid? So, I think that's a huge issue in terms of trying to get someone. He will, he had Chris Kise. Chris Kise is a good attorney. Chris knows what he's doing. He knows his way around the federal courts. But Donald Trump has not been able to assemble a team here. And you really do need a team of people who are familiar with these types of cases. When you go into a case, you want specialization. You want an attorney who specializes in national security documents, who specializes in the procedures of national security. He's not going to be able to get that, and so he's going to be at a disadvantage.
Yeah, and Rashonda, before we wrap up, what might the country look like with a former president on trial during the election, and perhaps a former president in prison?
I think he's going to delay this. I think that's the strategy. Use every tactic to delay this until he can't be prosecuted. Because if he wins the election, this whole thing is moot. And so I think that'll be his focus. But I think it is a sad state of the country that we're in, that this is even an option that we're facing. But I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think his competition is going to call him out. I mean, right now, you have Chris Christie is the only one that's vocal, speaking out against him. Asa Hutchinson kind of straddles the fence, but Chris Christie, now Chris is going all in. But the rest of the candidates, I think journalists need to continue to call them to the carpet to get them to speak out on this. I think they're hoping that Trump silently goes away, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
We saw, and I got to mention this before, and I'm glad Greer also mentioned this. We saw in the crowd blacks for Trump. They were wearing the shirts. We saw a lot of white folks wearing the blacks for Trump. Yeah, Attorney Tarver. Other than money, what else is behind that?
Oh, the blacks for Trump?
Yes.
Well, look, you know, we've discussed this. A lot of people, black people particularly, have been enthralled with the myth of Donald Trump. Remember, the rappers involved him in their videos. He was in whatever that Christmas movie was. I can't even think of the name of it. So he was larger than life. A lot of people attach themselves to that larger than life image. There is nothing that he has done for the black community that I think anyone could really articulate, but he trouts that line of you know, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, that we as black people are responsible for our own condition in America and our own destiny. And that plays well with a lot of different people who are from either African and Caribbean backgrounds, because of that whole mantra of self-determination. And I don't say that pejoratively, but that appeals to a lot of them. And you've seen a lot of those types of candidates arising. So there are some real reasons for those people standing up, but there's not many.
Yeah. You see a lot, and we'll close after this. We see a lot of folks talk about his whether or not he's a loyal person, and and Rashonda, how might that play as they start turning over the witness list and realizing who's on the witness list, and even getting more witnesses in his various cases?
Anyone who thinks Trump is loyal has been asleep for the last 4 or 5 years. I think his co-defendant now really needs to get his own attorney. I think he's hanging on, hoping, you know, Trump will watch after him. But we know how that goes. So there is nothing loyal about Trump.
You know what? I want to tease something before you go, because
yes,
I think we missed something this week. Donald Trump said something about, he said, and it was in passing. He said, "Oh, I might take a plea if they offered, I think it was like some sort of money or apology or something like that." He said it kind of in passing as a joke. Don't discount that. Yeah. Donald Trump only has 2 ways out of this: either to win the presidency or to take a plea. And a negotiated plea is the only way he could possibly get out of jail time. So I don't think DOJ would allow that, but it's still open. And the fact of the matter is that as long as he has that option and can get away with that cleanly, and he can get away cleanly, because what Donald Trump would say is simply this. He would say, you know, I took the plea and they decided to pay me. There'd be no evidence of it. And he'd tell his throng, well, they're not going to put it in paperwork, but whatever, like that, you know. So I would not discount the whole idea that that his team is talking to DOJ about a potential plea.
Well, wouldn't it be Wouldn't it be almost automatic? Obviously, you're a very accomplished attorney. Wouldn't it be almost automatic in cases like this, and in particular, because he has so many cases and so many potential cases that his attorney, one of the early things to do is to say, how do you feel about a plea?
Yeah, it would be malpractice not to consider a plea here. Now, whether or not your client would take it or allow you to discuss it or allow you to even go to them, because knowing Donald Trump, he may even have a prohibition against them even going to them, thinking that there is some news value or a detriment in news if they go there and people find out that, hey, they were talking plea. But, those conversations tend to be very, very confidential, depending on how they're held. And I wouldn't doubt that they've already attempted to have those conversations after the indictment, and that those conversations will go on. And sometimes those conversations, quite frankly, go on even behind the client's back, where you're just discussing, look, how do we work this? Is there a way to work this? What can we do? What would you consider? What would the terms look like? And I've done that. Even when the client has said that I'm not interested in plea, no, I'm still working on your behalf. I'm still trying to make something happen. And that's what a good, responsible attorney does. He or she always tries to make something happen on behalf of their client. So I don't doubt that.
It's not that you believe your client is guilty, right? It's just in the best interest of the client to listen to all facets, any potential offer.
Wouldn't matter. Doesn't matter whether the client's guilty of sin or whether the client is innocent. It depends on what the state can prove and what the risk factor is. And if the risk factor is high enough that you are going to be convicted, I have a responsibility to let you know, as your attorney and as a person who has the experience, that you're probably going to go down. It doesn't matter whether or not you're guilty or not. So with that in mind, my job is to get the best outcome that I can get for you. Now, obviously, in a political situation with Donald Trump, the best outcome may prove to be something a little different in terms of what he wants. But in terms of what we do as attorneys, we're trying to get the best outcome in terms of liberty and liability for our clients.
Rashonda, well, both of you, and I'll let Rashonda go first, and then Attorney Tarver on this, just along the lines of the plea. Could you foresee, at the very least, the former president's team offering some sort of plea in which they would not run for president in exchange for not running for president?
If something were like that were to happen, I see Trump saying, I'm doing this for the betterment of my country. We've gone through enough. This country is corrupt, and I don't want to continue dragging the people through it. He would go out that way. No way would he go out admitting guilt.
Exactly. That is a very astute observation. The way that he would twist this thing around, and put it in that perspective. That's how it would have to be done. Right?
Power 96 says, salute to the guy in the jail outfit. He stole the show. What you saw in that video there, a guy approached Trump's motorcade in a jail outfit. And of course, he was arrested, later identified as a 61-year-old man. Interesting stuff. Attorney Robert Tarver Law Firm. You gotta, if you're ever in need of an attorney for any reason, just give him a call. I'm sure he doesn't mind me saying that. He probably says, I got enough cases, leave me alone. But but he's the best. And of course, check out the Defender Network and Rashonda Tate. I gotta drop that bill. She paid that bill.
Paid in full.
Paid in full. Thanks for watching, everybody. And tomorrow we'll have some different news for you. Promise you. See you then.
Bye-bye.